Jesse likes to flail on the surface in most instances.
Welcome everyone to another awesome episode of the Average Ontario Anglers Fishing Podcast. Now this is a super special episode because you know what it is, Andrew? This is episode 100. And did you ever think we'd get this far, Andrew?
I have to say, my fellow co-host, I don't think so.
I never thought we'd get past 25, but here we are at 100. We'd like to say to everyone, thank you so much for your support and helping us get this far. We actually have a really cool episode. This is an episode that is on a topic that we get asked for all the time, but we don't really talk about as much because we are not good at this kind of fishing. We're talking about walleye fishing, which is one of the most, probably crappie and walleye are the two biggest requested episodes. So because me and Andrew are the worst at this, we thought that we would have a really cool guest this episode. So we actually have Derrick.
Thanks for having me.
So Derrick, he owns the company Tactical Fishing Gear. And I'm sure some of you guys have heard that before. They make really high quality stuff. We're going to get more into some of the stuff. A lot of it is based and focused on fishing in the areas of Lake St. Clair, Lake Erie, the Detroit River, that area, which again is somewhere that me and Andrew have only been once in our life. So we are very excited to learn about this. And hopefully the listeners too are going to pick up on this stuff because this is something very interesting. Before we get into the main topic though, we have, as tradition states, the interesting fishing fact. And to handle that this week, we have the man with the mustache and the beard, Andrew.
That describes all of us, but thanks for saying my name.
You're welcome.
I wanted to start off with, we have the loon kind of as our mascot, right? And when you think of an angling type of bird, the loon might be the first thing that comes to mind. What would you say is the next bird that comes to mind when you think of an angling bird?
Like an osprey?
That's a good one too, dang it. I'm thinking probably one of the largest birds. I always love seeing them fly around in the sky is the great blue heron. It's always just a nice special moment when you're fishing like a back bay and there's one standing on a log and you're just watching it, like seeing who's going to catch a fish first. And I always lose that fight. They're very common. Like I said, I've seen a few already this year flying above in some groups going, back north, which is fantastic. So I wanted to do some kind of interesting fishing facts or interesting facts about herons in general. Now, Jesse or Derrick, how many herons do you think that we have? Different species of herons do you think that we have in Ontario?
Like 4?
I'm going to say 10.
I like Derrick's optimism. But if with Price is Right rules, you both lose. There's 3.
I was close.
There are many, many different types, different species of herons. Worldwide, there's 64 different species. But like I said, we have 3 here in Ontario. I think about 5 across Canada. We have the great blue heron, which we all know and love, I'm sure. They can be up to 1.4 meters tall or 4.5 feet. They have a wingspan of 2 meters or 6.5 feet. And they can weigh up to, get this, 5.5 pounds.
Wow.
That's so
Go
light.
on a diet.
It's got
I feel like that's
wingspan.
awfully light for how big some of them are.
I know. Well, unlike loons, they don't have solid bones. So they're like most other birds. Another species we have is the green heron. It's more compact. It only stands about 17 inches tall with a 27-inch wingspan. I've only seen these guys a couple times, but they're way smaller than you'd think when you expect to see heron. The third one, which I don't know of anyone who's ever seen one. I'm sure people have, and if you have, please let us know. I know I definitely haven't. It's the black-crowned night heron. Sounds awesome.
It sounds really cool.
It's 25 inches tall, so larger than the green heron, and has a 44-inch wingspan. I'm going to go into a few of the things they have. For example, that black-crowned night heron, obviously it lives up to its name. It only comes out at night, which is why I'm sure many people haven't seen it. Pretty much never seen during the day. But how herons work or how they fish, they give us really good lessons, I think, as anglers that we can really learn from. The first thing that comes to my mind is patience. When you see a heron and they're just standing there, not moving, waiting for that perfect time to strike, minutes not moving at all. When it comes time to it, and this is the hook set, when you feel that tap, tap, and you got to go, the great blue heron strike is estimated at 100 plus kilometers an hour. or 60 miles an hour plus. So wicked fast. Accuracy is insane. Like they use their bills, their beaks as a spear essentially. So they don't like open their mouth to try and like grab stuff. They'll actually just skewer it with their bill sometimes. And they'll spear their prey, these fish or frogs, or I've seen videos of gophers and stuff. They eat anything they can catch pretty much. The green heron, which is that smallest one we have in Canada, is also extremely smart. Just like us anglers, it uses bait to catch fish. It'll drop insects into the water or leaves into the water to lure the fish closer to it, and then it will strike.
That's lame. It doesn't use artificial lures.
It does. It uses leaves.
Oh, okay. It's pretty much like a fly.
Again, going back to worldwide, we don't have, unfortunately, as impressive and big as the blue heron is, we don't have the largest heron in the world. That's the Goliath heron. It stands 5 feet tall with a 7-foot wingspan. So, I mean, it's only 6 inches taller than the blue heron. It's not crazy. But I will say that I looked into, some of the records or impressive facts about herons. The largest heron ever recorded, or largest blue heron ever recorded in Ontario, was 2.2 meters or 7.2 feet wide at its wingspan. So a little bit higher than, even a little bit wider than a Goliath wingspan, but it's definitely, a few inches longer than your average blue heron. I didn't realize that they traveled over 4,000 kilometers to South America every single winter. That's a big bird to be flying that far. And despite us always seeing them kind of wading around on the shore or maybe on land getting frogs against the shoreline, they can dive up to 2 feet deep, which doesn't sound that impressive, but for a bird that doesn't have like solid bones, it's not really geared for diving, no webbed feet. This thing can dive 2 feet. That's pretty good.
Better than me.
Jesse likes to flail on the surface in most instances. And much like us, Jesse, when we go camping, blue herons eat at least a pound of fish every day. Another thing I wanted to mention is there's a lot of folklore I noticed about herons as well, and I just want to go into just briefly a couple of them. So some indigenous legends tell of herons that would lead fishermen to the best fishing spots, and that seeing one before a trip was considered good luck. I don't know about you, but if I see a heron in a bay, I usually go fish that bay. And I didn't realize I'm essentially following in like native tradition, like Aboriginal traditions by doing so. But I'm like, if there's bait there that heron's catching, there's going to be bigger fish potentially.
I thought that was just because you were a bird nerd.
The term is, I don't remember the term. Oh, no, I don't remember the term. Horticulturalist? No, I think that's plants.
No, that's plants.
Ornithologist. I believe that's what it is. Correct me if I'm wrong, people. I know you will anyways.
Hopefully that doesn't mean something terrible. It's okay.
The other thing that they were, so instead of being kind of a sign of good luck for fishing, there's also folklore that fishermen in the past believed that if a heron flew high above in the sky, bad weather was coming. But if it stayed low, the weather would be calm. So if you saw like flying herons, it was a bad omen. I don't know. Either way, I like to follow them and go fish where they are. But
if they're flying away, that means there's no fish there, so you're doomed.
Or they're fed up, or they got their pound of fish like early in the morning and they're done, and there's so many fish in that spot.
So either they're there and there's fish, or they're not there and there's fish. Come on, man, make up your mind.
That's up to the listener to decide.
Let us know.
So that's I've always been fascinated by the herons, but yeah, I didn't realize that there were that many worldwide. But again, I'm going to keep my eyes out to see if I can find all 3 species this year.
That's cool. You better get out your night vision goggles. That's actually very interesting. I didn't know they flew all the way down to Brazil. That's interesting. I never really thought about where they go in the winter. But yeah, the Interesting Fishing Fact is a segment that we do every single episode where we learn about stuff that usually is in Ontario, possibly Canada, from fishing to wildlife to things you might bump into in the bush. So that's a cool one, Andrew. I'll give you a thumbs up for that one. Now, I would just like to mention one thing. Now that we're down to 2 episodes a month, it's not every other weekend. We've said this a few times. I had a few people ask me at CanCast a few weeks ago. It's the first and third Sunday of every month. So some months are kind of weird where it's, an extra weekend in there that doesn't get a podcast, but it's 2 a month, not every other weekend, just as a heads up. So we're really happy to have Derrick on. I thought before we started to delve in kind of the walleye fishing stuff, you could kind of tell us about a little bit about the history of like you starting to fish, what you like to fish for, and maybe about your brand as well.
Pretty well fished my whole life. My old man was a shore fisherman, a little bit of boat. I call him a meat hunter. He likes to eat everything. As I grew up a little bit, I got the itch for tournament fishing. I started off in the bass scene. I started fishing it was the FLW back then, the BFLs as a co-angler. I got lucky and won one my first year, and I've just been addicted ever since. And living on St. Clair and down here, it's it's multi-species. I would argue that it's probably one of the best fisheries in the world. You can go catch 50-inch muskie, 12-pound walleyes, 2-pound perch, 6-pound smallmouth. The only thing we have, but not in plentiful, is giant largemouth. But there's a lot of them. Just always 2 or 3 pounders.
It's crazy. We were just saying that we went to St. Clair last year in November for muskie, and we were talking to so many people on the bank and people that we were fishing with, and it's an insane fishery, like totally different from where we fish in the Kawarthas. It's like fishing paradise there. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's one of the places you can roll up to a marina or the Belver Marina and catch a 50-incher offshore casting muskies, right? It's just
that happened the
it's a
day we
unique.
were there. Yeah, some kid caught like a 52-inch from shore.
Yeah, it's happened a lot.
And you're not joking when you say there's big smallies. I mean, I didn't catch like a 6-7 pounder by any means, but I would say it was over 3. We didn't weigh it, but we were muskie fishing again and on that trip. And I was casting like the biggest rattle trap they make. Like, it's huge. Like, I think the rattle trap is like 5 inches long, and this smallie just crushed it on this rock flat. It's like, that's wicked.
About cool. 6 or 7 years ago, when the smallmouth fishing was like crazy good down here, the muskie guys were complaining when trolling, catching smallmouth on their 10-inch baits looking like perch.
There's typical muskie guys complaining when they catch a 6-pound smallmouth. Like, dang it, what is this piece of junk? Get off.
They claim it's a 6-pound smallmouth. Claiming and actually being is a lot different.
Exactly. So when it comes to tactical fishing gear, it's something that in our area, I haven't seen them in the stores, but I know out in your area, there's a lot of stores that carry this stuff. And we were at CanCast a few weeks ago, and that was the first time that we actually got to see the stuff personally. I mean, we picked up some stuff. We're really excited to try it out. So how did that kind of materialize starting that?
Yeah, so I used to work with a company called Lunker Hunt, and I've always been super interested into the market and tournament fishing. You guys know it's expensive, and I was just really tired of paying $800 a rod or $500 a rod, and I thought had to be a way to do it a lot better and a lot cheaper, and that's what it was. So I started trying to source it with my partner at the time, and it took 7-8 goes at it to get a couple rods that we wanted. And I knew the Detroit River market was a giant market for jigging walleyes. So we came out with a 6'3" jigging special. I asked 25 guides, what's your favorite length? Half said 6'6" and half said 6 feet. So I made a 6'3". Let's try to make everyone happy. That does not always work, just to let you know.
Yeah.
I was going to ask how that worked out for you.
Yeah. You think you go in the middle, then the next day someone emails and says, well, why don't you make a 5-footer? So we started with the 6'3". It's made from like a 36-ton carbon. If you wanted to compare it to tons of carbon, it's not that, but that's the most similarity. And I wanted to give the anglers the most sensitive rod, the most lightweight with the best bang for the buck. And that's what took so long to get it developed and get it right. I go to argue that it's probably one of the lightest jigging rods on the market right now for the price point. And then it just kind of expanded from there. I'm a tournament bass guy. I love chasing smallmouth. So we started out with a whole line of spinning rods. And now we went from 5 rods. I think we're up to 12 now, including a musky rod.
And later in the podcast, maybe we'll go through some of the rods me and Andrew picked up as well. I'm really excited to try these out. And we're, again, average Ontario anglers. We're guys that, we have rods, GLXs down to ugly sticks, but we like that sweet spot. The price point that your rods are at like a very attainable level for most anglers, that you're getting a rod that's high performance, but you're not breaking the bank. And that's, I think, what most people are looking for. So we're going to get into that a little bit, but I thought we could dive into walleye fishing. Andrew, do you have your notepad out? Take notes. This is stuff that we want to learn. We do fish for walleye, but most of the time where we fish, we're fishing a lot of the Kawartha Lakes for walleye, which is a different world. You're fishing a lot of weeds, which is the opposite. Like we're ripping, bucktail jigs through the weeds, or, throwing swimbaits and kind of ripping them through the weeds, stuff like that. So I can only imagine what we're going to learn is very opposite to that. So I'm excited.
Yeah, so whenever you talk to anyone about fishing walleye in the Kawartha, it's like, how do you catch them? Like rip hair jigs. That's all anyone's ever told me about catching walleye in Kawarthas. So this is going to be the first time we're going to hear from a guy who, is an accomplished walleye angler who's going to tell us something different than rip hair jigs. He might still say that. I don't know, but he's also going to tell us something else.
Yeah, St. Clair's similar to the Kawarthas. Like come summertime, it's a lot of deep weeds. There's weeds 20 feet high Those walleyes cruise in and out of it. Most of the time, summertime, they're cruising sand flats and stuff like that. And there's an abundance of them generally. It's not just one or two, it's schools of 10 to 20, maybe even 30. Like anything, live scopes taught us more now than ever. I'm going to say trolling's almost starting to become a thing of the past. A lot of guys that were trolling are now casting, and that even goes from the national, like from, just guys recreational fishing all the way to the National Walleye Tour. A lot of walleye events are now one casting swim baits and targeting fish via live scope. As much as some people love it and some people hate it, it's just you're learning so much from it, and that's happening. But I'm lucky. We have arguably probably the best walleye fishery in the world with the Detroit River in the spring, and it's severely underrated even in the fall. Like you could still get 60, 70, 80 fish days in the fall sometimes when those fish come in there. But that Detroit River is just special, man. It's a true chance any day you can go out and get a 10-pounder in the spring, and it's fun. The transitional period is a little tough to learn, and learning how to do it is tough to learn. But once you get the gist of it, it's a pretty unique way to catch them. And there's hundreds of thousands of people that are doing it now. Like you can look down the river, and I'm sure you guys seen it in the fall, even muskie fishing. Like there could be 60, 70 boats on a drift sometimes, if not 300.
But it doesn't matter because there's so many fish. Like we had the guy we were fishing with had live scope, and he was pointing it around, and he's like, there's a muskie, there's a muskie, there's a muskie, there's a muskie. Like the concentration of fish is absolute insanity. It blew our minds.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys seen there's a thing going around on Facebook and Instagram how they tracked a bunch of walleyes all the way across Lake Erie and how far they go and how many don't enter that river. It's impressive. So many spawn on Lake Erie around like the Ohio Reefs and Pelee, and they travel end to end as crazy as it seems. Some of those fish winter over in Ohio, and they live on Eastern Erie and down by the Niagara River, and they go back and forth every year. As much as we think we know about these walleyes and what they do, it's just fish in general. You can even say it's crazy how much you can learn by these studies that are getting so advanced.
I remember seeing that kind of video of like a bunch of dots of the walleye, the tagged walleye being moved around, and it was cool to see how much they did move and how much some just stayed in the same spot. Like there's
same spot the whole year,
different behaviors.
What blew my mind is how many fish are in the Detroit River in the spring, and it doesn't even look like it compared to what Ohio has on that map. Like it almost looks like the beacons are broken and the fish never leave.
It's like a total insane place to fish. Like, Andrew, why aren't we going there this spring? I mean, seriously, let's do it. So speaking about that area, Detroit River, Lake St. Clair, Erie, what makes those places unique when it comes to walleye fishing?
I think it's current more than anything. They say Lake St. Clair cleans itself out every 7 days. So you think about Huron flushing down to the St. Clair River, flushing all through Lake St. Clair, flushing the Detroit River out to Erie, down the Niagara River. I think it's just constant movement of water and an abundance of bait. The walleye hatch has been so good for probably about a decade now, that there's so many of them that the perch fishing kind of went down. It was catching more, 10, 11, 12-inch walleyes than it was catching 10-inch perch. And I think on Western Erie, it's not as clean as Eastern Erie either. So you have that dirtier water, which they like, and they stay there a lot longer and they spawn better in that compared to other areas where it's super clear water. So I truly think that a current has a lot to do with it. And they love those river mouths and channel edges, and they do leave them, and you can catch them all over the lake. You could probably catch a walleye in just about any part of Lake St. Clair on any given day. It's truly that good.
So when it comes to walleye in those systems, what is the main kind of stuff that these fish are feeding on that can support such a massive population and also giant fish as well?
So for a very long time was a goby. Those walleyes, I would almost say, cleared out St. Clair of gobies. They definitely you find little perch, you find walleyes. That's common across all of Ontario pretty well. And emerald shiners. I think those are the three main key things that they're eating. Perch for the most part, and then a lot of minnows. But like 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, we used to see you catch a walleye in the fall and it'd be spitting gobies. I haven't seen that in a long time. And it's kind of fading and fading and fading on our end compared to other places. You go up to Kingston and catch one in the St. Lawrence River and it's spitting a goby. It's not like that down here.
So they cleared out most of the gobies. I mean, they're invasive, so whatever.
them and the smallmouth and perch have a little bit to do with it too, but
yeah.
I'm sure the walleyes have a bigger play than any other species, and I don't think a lot of people realize that.
So when it comes to spring fishing, again, this podcast is coming out in mid-April-ish, something like that. So if someone was wanting to go fishing for walleye this time of year, what are some of the things that they'd have to consider for areas that they'd want to fish?
So mostly, if you're coming down here to fish in the spring, you're fishing the Detroit River, or if you're want to troll, I guess you could troll the shorelines of Lake Erie. The main thing we have issue with are wind and water clarity. You want that, I call it the sweet tea. You want it like a little bit dirty with that tinge of green in it, so you can barely see your trolling motor head. You find that water, you got a chance to get a good one. And most of the time it's upper shallow. You can catch them as shallow as probably 5 feet in that river, and deep as 35, 40. But most of those fish are coming in there to spawn early, the big females, and then the males follow after. But that's the biggest thing you want to watch is the weather. Wind conditions, the U.S. side always stays a lot clearer because of the St. Clair River and Huron, just the way the current flows. They have 3 outlets in north, south, and middle channel. And that flows a lot cleaner water from Huron through the U.S. side and down, where the Canadian side has a lot bigger creeks and flow from rain and whatever. But arguably, the Canadian side generally has bigger fish because our water's a little muddier.
Heck yeah.
With that being said, you can literally drift the center of the river and catch males at any time of the year. It's just if you're truly looking for a trophy, you want to focus in that little bit stainer water and up a little bit shallower than most.
So what would you say? I'm not super familiar with like the fishing seasons out that way or what's open and what's not. But
yeah,
from this podcast, like we're looking mid-April. As you go through the season progresses, like how does the fishing change from say like mid-April going on to, getting warmer towards summertime? Is it completely different or is it similar?
It gets completely different. Pretty well from ice out. We actually had ice this year, so it's pretty cool. But from ice out, let's say early to mid-March, all the way to, I usually say Easter. Easter's a little later this year, but that's your window to get a big one in the river. Those Lake Erie fish, and they all some Huron fish come in. The St. Clair River, you can catch them pretty well all winter long. It rarely freezes, and guys leave their boats in and they jig walleyes the whole year. But in the Detroit River specifically, I would say middle March to Easter, middle April is like your main sweet spot. After that, you have a lot of it's a lot more plentiful fish. After that, I would say from middle of April to the middle of May. If you want to come down for numbers like 100 fish days, that's when you want to come. But that early bite is a lot slower. Water's a lot colder. They're not as aggressive yet, unless you get those sweet days where it's 60 degrees and sunny and the water's warming up and you catch those pre-spawners. It's pretty fun, but it's such a small window. What a lot of people don't realize is that these walleyes don't all come and spawn at once. There's waves, and I think those waves go for about a month, maybe even a month and a half. We caught some big fish all the way like almost to the first week in May. I call them lazy spawners. They just forgot they had to spawn and they show up late. Pretty well after that, the males take over. I was reading something a couple of days ago that they said that a fish can literally lay its eggs and 24 hours later be gone completely out of the river system. Wow. And you're traveling miles after that to just go out in the lake and roam around looking for food.
So they do their business and they're out of there.
Most of the females do, apparently.
Interesting. So springtime in general is a good time to catch walleye there.
Yeah. Summertime walleye, a lot of guys they start trolling on Lake Erie after that. The belief is a lot of the fish release out of both the Detroit River on Lake St. Clair. Some go up the Canadian shoreline, and a lot of them release to Lake Erie. That's when you guys are starting trolling crankbaits and stuff like that, worm harnesses, etc. But like I said, a lot of guys now are live scoping and targeting them, catching them on swim baits, and learning that you're trolling over a pot of 100 walleyes and you're catching one. Or if you live scope it, you can stay on them and catch a dozen out of that school, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. So it's similar to, from what I'm understanding, it's similar to like the Detroit River when you're musky fishing in the fall. Like there's such a concentration at that time, but then
exactly.
In the summertime, they're kind of more spread out. You could catch them anywhere in the lake. So,
that's exactly it.
Yeah. It sounds intimidating to fish a whole lake and not know where fish are, of course. So that's why we're saying if you do want to fish this area, springtime is the best because the fish are more concentrated for sure.
Absolutely. St. Clair's just a giant bowl. Like there's nothing to it.
That sounds easy, but also terrifying at the same time.
Yeah, there's a lot of water.
impressed me of, yeah, it's a bigger lake than you think. Like, oh, it's called like a oh, it's a small lake between the Great Lakes. Like, it's a big lake. Like, it's not just a small little thing, and that it's supporting a huge population of game fish. But what impressed me the most is the bait fish that it supported. I mean, even for musky fishing, when you're there in the fall and you're seeing just the shad like going in for their spawn, and you're seeing clouds. And when I say that, I mean literal, like 30-foot, 50-foot giant ball clouds of these fish. And then we pushed them to a river with a live scope, and the entire river was just full of them. Like, it was blowing my mind. And that was just one of the species of bait fish that's there.
Yeah.
But even then, like, we it was pretty cool too, because it, despite being called just, it's just a bowl, it impressed me where, like you were saying, the dirty water and the clear water, depending where it's coming from, you could see like a line of clear water and then stained water right on the border of Canada, US, down at the Detroit River. Like, that was so bizarre.
That happens a lot of the year, to be honest. The Canadian shoreline is just a lot shallower, and we don't have as much current as the US, so it takes a little longer to filter out.
Remember that all too clear one about the whitefish? It was pretty interesting. It was saying that all of the mussels in the Great Lakes are like clearing the water insanely clear, like clearer than it's ever been. And for that reason, there's been like a massive decline. They were talking about whitefish in this particular episode, but they're saying there's a massive decline in whitefish, sometimes like up to 80% less, because the UV from the sun is actually killing the eggs and the hatchlings before they can even get that big at all, because the sunlight's coming down and just roasting the eggs in the water that the whitefish are used to spawning at. So clear water, I know a lot of people will be like, oh, clear water, it's beautiful, it looks great, this is amazing. But it's like, no, like, you want some dirty water that actually supports algae and bait fish and microplankton and all that stuff. And therefore the bigger fish feed on that, and the even bigger fish feed on those fish. So that's, I think, when we fished the Detroit River, and it was pretty murky compared to what we normally fish in the courses, are pretty clear lakes generally. It definitely supports all that extra life, which again is one of those things that makes that system so unique and such a good thing.
Yeah, and it's intimidating for people who are not used to it. Like, I could see somebody losing confidence really quick coming here and seeing that. That's used to casting, super clear lakes up north.
Absolutely. So I thought we could talk right now about our giveaway. So we actually have a pretty sweet giveaway. Why don't you handle that, Derrick? Because it's your giveaway.
Awesome. We spoke about this. I was going to give away some product, but we have so many new products out. I think the best way is we're going to do a $250 gift card to our store online. We'll ship whatever products you want right to your house, whether it's a rod and a bunch of baits. We came out with a ton of new product this year, and still some coming. Pretty excited about our new lineup, from musky baits to walleye baits to smallmouth baits, and we're growing as a brand, a lot more multi-species. Yeah, that's the can cast special right there. That thing sold like hotcakes. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, that's the new combat swimmer, the musky bait.
Yeah, something that hasn't been done and marketed for a musky bait per se yet. A lot of our walleye plastics and smallmouth plastics are made from your TPE plastics. So we had a lot of our customers asking for a musky bait for it. So we did it.
Demand's a good word, right? That's, you've been in the business, so you understand. Like, you made Joe's first rod 6'3", and then people said, I want a 5-footer.
And then I pleased them. I made a 5'9".
Yeah, that's awesome. And the price point for those of you who are listening to that, a $250 gift card can buy you a rod and a bunch of baits. So when we were talking before of like a good quality rod, a great quality rod, and then to have for a good price point, that's what you're getting. What you normally be spending that whole $250 on just your rod, you're now able to get a bunch of baits from Tactical as well. So that's the benefit that you have for going with him.
Yeah, so a $250 gift card is pretty insane, right, Andrew? Like, what could you get with $250?
After being to St. Clair, I tell you, I like musky fishing, so I'd probably be getting the musky rod, which I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Derrick, I think those go for what, $150 on your shop? That might have been a can cast special, but
$179. We did a can cast special just to get them out there, $179, and I don't think you're going to get a better feeling rod for the price.
So $179, that still leaves you $71 left. And how much do you sell these combat simmers for? Because you could get probably 3 different colors, and then all you're doing is paying tax and everything. Like, that's a sweet deal.
Yeah, there's $35 online.
I know this is a walleye podcast, but we like musky stuff. clearly. But I would definitely get one of these swimmers, these big musky swimmers. Obviously, this is a podcast, so I'm going to describe this to you. It is basically, it's a big musky swim bait, and it's shaped just like a shad, because in the Detroit River, St. Clair, that's the main forage of these big muskie. They're big minnows basically, but they're not thin. They're really wide minnows. So this perfectly looks like a shad, 100%. And it has, what you said, this has BKK hooks on it?
Yeah, BKKs.
Yeah, so like we just talked about BKKs the other episode, Andrew, but like they're some of the best hooks you can get, and they're strong and they're really sharp. Because sometimes you think like, oh, muskie's going to just inhale the bait, but sometimes they just swipe at it. So it's always worth your time to have super sharp hooks on your bait. But there's tons of other baits on the Tactical Fishing Gear website that you could look at. And they're more walleye baits, because that's what this episode's about, Andrew. So I guess we should not talk about muskie stuff. Actually, some guy at CanCast was like, I love the podcast, but man, you just like talk about muskie all the time. I was like, yeah, it's the best.
Yeah. I won't claim to be a musky guy. I had a lot of help designing that bait, and I just wanted it to be as most versatile as possible. I wanted it to be able to cast it and slow roll it, or yo-yo it, or vertical jig it. It's actually a stellar swim bait to vertical jig because of the way the harness is inside, but I will not claim to be a musky expert. I would rather catch any other species.
And
Fair enough.
Bringing it back to walleye then, Jesse, another thing you can get, again, on his site, the Tactical Minnow is another TPE plastic. So super stretchy, and I'll explain to it verbally, but I have a bump board here I picked up there at CanCast. It's 32 inches long. This is a 4.5 inch plastic. I'll put the tail down at the bottom. I know it's backwards. Usually the head goes to the bottom of the bump board. 4.5 inches long, and we're going to see how far it's going to stretch. Oh, all the way to the top.
32 inches.
32 inch stretch on these things. Like, that's absolutely insane.
Yeah, what ends up happening with these baits is your hook and your jig wear out way before the bait.
Yeah.
And it's in the walleye industry. It's super popular in the bass industry, but in the walleye industry, it hasn't fully caught on yet. Our caliber worm, for example, is made from the exact same material. It's the same thing. It stretches a 3.5 inch worm, but it could literally be a substitute on a worm harness. And we have guys that don't even change a worm the whole year, like hundreds of walleyes on one bait. The most I've actually caught on one of our minnows before I actually snagged and lost a jig was like 73 walleyes on one jig in minnow, which is unheard of. But it's taking, technology from the bass industry and focusing it to the walleye industry. I don't know if you can see it or not, but a unique thing on this is we did a web tail. If you look at that tail, it displaces a lot more water in the water column. And we have some videos on our Instagram where in a tank, how it shows the tail, like how it flutters down when it's falling. It entices a lot more bites, especially when they're not snapping at the jig per se. A lot of time in the early spring, guys use a lot of minnows. And what this does, it gives you a little bit more of that displacement and triggers bites that you generally don't get on other plastics. And another thing about going to we call it recoil plastic, but it's a type of TPE is what it is. And what it does is it allows your bait to be a lot softer than your standard plastisol. So you're getting a lot more action out of it, and it floats. So it keeps that, that jig it's always doing something, especially in the current. You could just hold it in the current and something's moving because of how soft it is. It's pretty wicked.
That's awesome. Like we talked a fair bit about your baits and all that stuff, but what about going back to kind of our main topic then of fishing for walleye and stuff? What are some of the essential equipment or gear that you would recommend having? Well, we'll start off with rods and reels for jigging again, like you're saying, the jigging technique. What are some go-tos that I know you talked to some other guys? You said about different lengths and stuff, but what's your preference for a jigging rod?
Yeah. If you asked me this question last year, I'm going to say our 6'3" jigging special, and it's my favorite rod I ever did. We just came out with a 5'9" compact special. I'm a tall guy, 6'1", and I was kind of like, 5'9", that seems tiny. And I went out testing, making sure the final adjustments on our new swim bait we just released were perfect. And I was using that, and I fell in love. How lightweight it is, how crisp the blank is, how the action was just perfect. It's a 5'9" medium heavy. It's probably the rod I would recommend to anybody that wants to come and do it. That 6 inches less of rod, the bite is just different. And I always said, like, I don't know if that's, I didn't want to go that short in a rod, but I wanted to make sure it was perfect when we were testing it. And I was blown away. And I'm a bass guy. Like, I like jigging a 7-footer sometimes. Like, we jig hair jigs a lot in the spring, and because I refuse to use minnows. That not only that, it's getting harder and harder to get them in Ontario more than
Mm-hmm.
anything too. That's the real method hair jig. It's staple for me, walleye fishing. I like to use baits that I can catch, an abundance of fish on, and I'm not rigging. I say it all the time in our Instagram posts, like more time fishing, less time rigging. People don't realize how much time is taking when you're rigging and messing with stuff all the time, and in a short window of time that you're out there. And that's about it, really.
And what about line and leaders? Like, what is something, again, you have a range of like super clear water some days to, like you said, really stained, dark, not quite tannic, but like, yeah, like a lot of like washout from the creeks and stuff coming in. As Jesse always calls it, like, chocolate milk when the creeks get blown, right?
It's got to be braid. I shouldn't say it has to be. It should be braid. I was talking to a guy at CanCast, and he came up to me and he goes, "Hey, do you guys make any ounce and a quarter jigs?" And I'm like, "Yeah, like, what are you fishing for? Like tarpon? Like what's going on?" He goes, "No, he was actually fishing the Detroit River." And I said, "Why do you need an ounce?" And he goes, "Oh, so I could feel the bottom." And I asked him what braid are you using. He goes, "Oh, 30-pound Power Pro." And I'm like, that's why you need that. I recommend the lightest braid you can get away with. A lot of people use 15 to 20. I use 8 to 10, mostly 8. We are working on a braid at Tactical. It's not perfect yet, but that's a little hidden secret that's out. It's good. It's not great. So I'm not going to release it yet. There's still a few tweaks. But your Power Pro, 8, it's a staple in the industry and hundreds of thousands of people use it, especially on the Detroit River. I would recommend 8. The breaking point of 8-pound braid is crazy. Everyone goes, "Oh, I'm going to catch a 10-pound walleye and it's going to break." No, it's not. They won't be breaking from that. There's 100-pound sturgeon that are landed on 8-pound Power Pro every year on that river.
And you bring that up. I know Jesse's made that point many times. Depending on what braid you get, there are some like Japanese braids where they snap exactly what their pound rating is. But for the most part, you're buying it around here. You're buying, even if you go like cheap, like spider wire or something like that, if it says 10-pound braid, you read the back of that package, it'll say 15 or 17-pound breaking strength. So you have a fair bit of wiggle room with most braids.
And the reason why I go down is because in current, the larger diameter line you have, the more drag there is, the less sensitive it is. So you're trying to stay vertical on these fish. And a good tip is for anybody that wants to come do it and is new to it, you're not trolling against the current. You're only fighting the wind. On a perfect day, nobody's out there. Your boat and jig should float simultaneously down the river. The only thing you're accounting for with the trolling motor is either boat wake or wind. And that's how you stay vertical. A lot of people think you have to back troll. That is not the case. It is far simpler than people think. A lot of people are intimidated by it, and it's really not. If you have the right setup and the right, feel for it, it doesn't take long to learn. But the biggest mistake I see is guys using too thick a braid. Shorecasters, for example, are very, very prone to using 20 to 30-pound braid because they're worried about snags and stuff like that. If your $1 jig snags, chances are it's gone anyways. It doesn't matter if it's 8 or 30-pound braid. With that being said, I always go to like a micro barrel swivel. I like the Spro one. I don't know the size off the top of my head. I want to say it's a 12, but then I always go down to 10-pound. I'm a high-end fluorocarbon guy. I like Tatsu. Like I said, I come from the bass world. I just thinner, got thin braid. You might as well use a good fluorocarbon. That fluorocarbon will last you forever. And I usually go about 2 feet. So if you do snap off, you get a couple 3 ties. The fish don't look up and say, "Oh, there's a barrel swivel and braid right there. I'm going to not bite it." So that they're just reacting to a jig that's flying by their face at a mile an hour type deal. That's basically the gist of it. 10 years ago, a half-ounce jig was the jig you wanted to use. And then it seems like it went to 5/8, and then now it's at 3/4, and then it's to 1 ounce and one ounce and a quarter. I rarely jig anything bigger than a 5/8 unless it's really windy, and I probably shouldn't even be out there anyways. But yeah, I would say to get someone started up, a 3/4 ounce jig and that setup would be ideal to get you going.
One last thing on kind of the equipment then is sonar. Now I know a lot of our listeners, like Jesse and I, don't have live scope, but like you said, you're learning a lot having it on these waters. Again, essentially X-ray vision for fish is what we all wanted ever since we were kids learning how to fish. Is I wish I could have Superman X-ray vision on these things, and that's pretty much what we're getting these days. So with that knowledge, first of all, like how do you use that equipment to kind of find the fish? But is there anything that can transfer to help other people who perhaps don't have access to it?
Absolutely. I've said this ever since LiveScope came out. I got it almost right away because I was intrigued by it. In the tournament world, if they let you use it and you don't have it, you're going to a gunfight with a butter knife. And that's just the truth with it. And then when you go into recreational fishing, I learn something every day. You know, you can make a pass on a drift of walleyes and not get bit, but you could see, 30, 40 fish on that drift chasing your jig, and you make one small adjustment, whether you change your color from a chartreuse to a purple or a brown, and then the next drift you catch 10. It just shows you that they're there, and then you have to figure out whether they're going to eat or not. With that being said, it can be the most frustrating tool to use. It's really hard to see them when they don't want to bite. It's almost annoying sometimes.
Sometimes it's worse to have live scope and actually see them down there and they reject you.
Agreed.
We were
Yeah.
fishing with a guy for walleye last year, and he had live scope, and he's like, he found a school of them kind of swimming, and he was getting so mad, like casting his bait, he was jiggling it right on top of them. They were just looking at it. He's like, come on.
Yeah.
I was like, it's almost better not knowing they're there than you didn't know that you got rejected.
Yeah. And what's cool about it, especially in the Detroit River, what I never knew before, I've seen it once before, but when you catch one, how much some walleyes are like bass. Like all of a sudden 5, 6, 7, 8 of them will chase up that one, and they peel off around like 15 feet from the surface, and they go back down. And even casting for them on Lake St. Clair and Lake Erie, you catch one, there'll be like a dozen of them that come right to the boat, and they'll sit underneath your trolling motor, no different than smallmouth. And I just never knew that before. I always thought walleyes were like ones and twos, and the schools are a lot bigger than what I always thought they were.
It's funny. The last few guests that we had, we talked to Jay Siemens a while back, 2 or 3 episodes back. We talked with Bobby Belmonte about crappie fishing, and they're both avid live scope users. Again, me and Andrew don't have it. But the main thing that they both said, same with you, is it's such a learning tool. You learn a lot about fish behavior. Again, there is some advantage to having it, obviously, but it doesn't guarantee that you're going to catch the fish. You still have to catch the fish. So it's definitely, it is a learning tool, good or bad, to make fishing a little bit easier, but you still have to catch them, right? So that's one thing. But if, say, you're talking to someone that doesn't own live scope and they just have a basic budget fish finder, could you give any advice on how they can use that or what they're looking for when they're, say, going down the river?
It's no different than your GPS maps. Early in the spring, the fish are on spawning flats. They're getting up on edges and big flats, 10 feet of water. So depth is a key thing early, and knowing the depth you're in as the transition goes. So they generally transition from shallower to deeper. And then as the season goes on, you catch them out in 35 feet. Not saying you can't catch them out there in 35 feet, but the abundance of fish are generally that way. 2D sonars, the depth in that river is so key because you can make one drift in, 15 feet and catch 8 fish, and then miss that drift by 10 feet, and now you're out 19 and not catch nothing. So my best advice is, if you end up catching fish at a certain depth, really pay attention to what depth that is. You wouldn't believe how prone these fish are to getting on a certain contour and sticking on it, whether it be, for a couple 100 yards or, until they get pushed off that, go up or go down. Those schools get super tight on some contours sometimes. So usually what I would tell anybody that's coming is just key on a certain depth for, if you don't get bit in 15, then try 17. If you don't get bit in 17, then try 20. If you don't get bit in 20, try 22. They're going to be at some depth. Every day changes. One day those fish could be spawning, like I said, and the next day they're cruising. And then 2 days from then, water gets super clean and they're out in 35. There's just so many boats on that river. It's really hard to not see somebody catching them. So maybe just go where you see them catching them.
Unless it's Derrick's boat. Stay away from him.
Not 6 feet off the bow, though. Like, just just following a line behind them.
Well, I've seen a lot of things on that river before, and that would be one of them.
Yeah,
we experienced that too.
Funny story. We were on the Detroit River, and when you musky fish on the Detroit River, there's lots of current, which is something we're not used to, fishing in the Kawarthas mostly. And basically, I know we described this in our musky episode last year, if you want to check that out, but you drive down to the bottom and then all the boats kind of drift together. And it's kind of like, it works out good. Everyone stays about, 50 to 100 feet away from each other. So you still have enough space to cast. We were all drifting down, and then this moron literally pushes his boat right in front of us and then anchors. The guy we were with was like, what the heck? Like, what are you doing? And he started casting like right in front of us. And I was jigging a bondy. And just then when he pushed in front of us, I smacked like a good muskie, like right under the boat. And he was like, I'm so glad you caught that fish right in front of him. But yeah, there is some etiquette involved. But yeah, if you see Derrick's boat, give him a little bit of space there.
I'll come up and say hi. It's got a nice, I just got it wrapped, just got it back the other day. I'm excited for it.
Tell him that, Jesse and Andrew said that you have to get a free pack of baits from him. So yeah, do that.
Deal. If someone comes up and says that, I'll give them a free pack.
Okay. You heard that, people. Hunt down this man until, I'm just kidding.
You have to make a caveat. You have to be like the first, one person or the first 5 people. Otherwise,
only one person.
5 years from now, people are just going to know.
We should definitely put a limit on that. First 10. We'll say the first 10.
That's very generous. Derrick is a very generous guy. If our listeners haven't learned that, I know Jesse and I sure have. He is very generous.
Well, he's spending time with us recording this, so he's generous and slightly crazy. So let's talk a little bit about techniques. So we talked about the gear, we talked about the jigs, and I thought we could now cover some basic techniques. Again, this podcast, a lot of people listen to it, but a lot of people that are just getting right into fishing and stuff that other people may find extremely, basic. We're going to kind of cover that because a lot of people actually are just getting into the sport. They want to know how to do stuff. And this is a good podcast that teaches them how to do that. So we'll cover, slightly more advanced, but also some basic stuff as well. So techniques for success for jigging. I know you kind of covered this a little bit, but what is an essential thing for jigging in heavy current? If someone like me and Andrew, we've never fished in heavy current before, what are some things to keep in mind when you are jigging in a heavy current?
Boat control. That's the number one thing. It truly is. It makes or break your whole day. Most of the time, you need your line to be vertical or semi-vertical. Sometimes it's harder than it seems with wind or whatever. That is the number one thing. And trying to match the hatch. It's no different than any other species. We know these fish are eating, worms and minnows. So put a worm or a minnow in front of their face. I'm not a live bait guy, and I don't even pretend to even enjoy it. I would rather catch 1 or 2 than 20 if I can use an artificial bait in some way, shape, or form. Earlier in this year, like I said, I feel like there's 3 main ways to catch walleyes. It's jigging, it's trolling, or it's casting. I feel those cover most of your ways that you're catching them. Whether you're casting and ripping jigs or you're hanging a minnow for walleyes, which is super popular now, especially in the National Walleye Tour. Slow rolling a swim bait, considered be casting for them. But vertical jigging walleye, like the number one thing is to get boat control, I would say. And then the rest comes second nature, really.
That was definitely when we went out last year. You can see the guys that are experienced by seeing how they handle their boat and how they position it a certain way. And they're not fighting the current, but they're working with the current. Because like you said, your line has to be vertically under the boat, which again, we fish in a lot of very clear water. So that generally would be like cast away from the boat so the fish can't see you. But again, the it has color to it. So you can literally go right over top of the fish and they don't care. Again, fish are not that smart, hopefully.
Yeah, and it's the same thing. Like walleye fishing is really no different than what you guys were doing muskie fishing, vertical jigging. We're letting a jig fall hit the bottom. As soon as you feel it hit the bottom, you're lifting it. Some guys lift it up 2 feet. Some guys lift it up 6 inches. Some days they want it, super aggressive, and some days they want it super slow. You just kind of have to play with it and figure out a cadence that they want. But it's just up, down, up, down, up, down, and it's really repetitive. But that boat control, keeping yourself vertical, keeps you in that strike zone and maximizes your fishing experience. You keep a jig in front of a fish's face long enough, it's a reaction, and that's what a lot of these fish are doing. They're just reacting to a jig. They don't necessarily follow it for a long time all the time. Although I've seen it on live scope, they follow it 7, 8, 9 jigs and they finally eat it. But most of the time they're like, oh, what's that? And they turn around and they bite it. They see something purple and chartreuse going by for some reason on the Detroit River is the biggest fish catching machine. That is a very popular one, and it catches giants. I was excited about that one in the spring, that swim bait.
So why don't we just quickly talk about that swim bait? Because of the baits that we picked up at CanCast, I know that this is a new release for you.
Yeah.
Why don't you talk a little bit about that swim bait?
So yeah, that's our new tactical swim bait. I'm proud of this one. It took me a very long time to get it right. I wanted a multi-species swim bait because we're a multi-species brand and I'm a multi-species angler, but I wanted a swim bait that could go onto a jig head and then it could be vertical jig. A lot of swim baits, when you vertical jig them, the tail comes back on the hook. So on this one, it's got a little bit of a wider profile and it extends down to the tail right to the the fin at the back. And what that does is it doesn't allow that swim bait to come back and grab your hook, which is very key for me in vertical jigging. There's a lot of swim baits on the market, even using Kitech. If it's one of the best swim baits in the world, but it's hard to vertical jig it because it's so soft and so subtle and it comes back. So that was key number one. Number two, like I said, I'm a smallmouth guy, so I wanted to be able to throw it on a super light head and get a nice wobble. It has like a nice shimmy to it in the water column. And then three, I want it to look as most realistic as possible. So with the design on the top and the 3D eyes, I like wanted it to be, a fish catching machine. And that's kind of what it is, from smallmouth to walleyes to muskies in the fall last year. They were crushing it, this little 3.5 inch bait.
It's just a good size too.
Yeah. And getting 6 colors that we're going to potentially, cover most of the market. At Tactical, we don't release a ton of colors. I like to, go 2 reaction and 4 natural. And that's exactly what we did. So we did, that's the Joker. We call it the Joker. It's your traditional, pimp daddy version of a walleye bait. And it catches them, man. Like, I drop shot this. When I was testing it, I was drop shotting it. I was doing all kinds of stuff with it, and it was just catching them. But the key for me was getting it right so that way I can use it for every application. I'm very excited about it. And, there was a lot of good hype at CanCast for it.
Absolutely. We always talk about, lures for people just getting into the sport, or lures that people should have, or baits. And swim baits are one of those baits. They catch literally everything, and you can fish them tons of different ways. I actually, when I got home from the show, I picked up some of these underspins, and I was like, for where I fish, I like to use little underspins. I'm like, that's going to absolutely slay. I have one of his 3.5 inch on a little 1/8 ounce underspin here. So I'm going to be trying that out as well. But it's great to have a bait that does multiple things. I know we talked about that with different people, about being versatile. Like you said, you can use this bait. You can drop shot it. You can jig it. You can throw it on a swim bait head. You can throw it on an underspin. The sky's the limits of how you can catch fish on that. It just looks like a tasty snack. And however you present it in front of those fish, they're probably going to grab it because they're hungry and it looks delicious.
Yeah, it mimics a shiner or a baby perch or whatever. It's just the right profile and the right size at 3.5 inches that it targets a wide variety of species.
Definitely. And I know we talked last year with someone we were talking about using like finesse baits. And he was saying that just because you're fishing for big fish doesn't mean necessarily that you have to use giant baits. And that's the finesse game it's blowing up right now. Like all the finesse swim baits and drop shot baits and Ned baits that are coming out, and guys are slamming fish on them. They're not giant baits. They're this big or smaller. So you don't have to worry about not catching giant fish like bass or walleye. You don't need giant baits all the time. Although it has happened, especially on the Detroit River, I'm sure. Catching walleye on musky baits and stuff like that. But it happens. But for consistency, I mean.
I had a guy tell me he was throwing, it was like pound and 3-ounce musky bait or something. I'm like, how do you even throw that after like 10 minutes? Like, let alone like 10 casts.
Musky anglers they're a special breed of people.
Yeah.
I'm not that crazy. I stop at about 10 ounces myself, but we were fishing last year and we were watching guys chuck pounders right beside us. It was like a cannonball hitting the water.
Yeah.
It's like,
you wouldn't believe how many muskies we just catch on a jig and a worm.
Yeah.
Especially even when the musky guys are in the river and we're jigging, they're not catching them and we're downsizing and catching them, or on a small 5XD crankbait or whatever, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Even in the musky world, I feel like it's a hidden gem, kind of maybe downsizing stuff.
Absolutely. I think especially in areas like on the Detroit River where the fish are seeing constantly all day long, like, swim bait, Royal Orba, swim bait. It's bulldog. Sometimes a smaller bait definitely might tempt them. So that's great advice. I thought we would throw in one thing, because I know in your area, this is a huge thing. It is a little bit in our area, but shore fishing for walleye, very specific areas where we fish that you could do that. But on the Detroit River and Lake St. Clair and stuff, when we were musky fishing anyway, tons of people were shore fishing. There's so much shore access. So can you talk a little bit about shore fishing for someone that maybe doesn't have a boat?
Yeah, so pretty well any park in Windsor is a public park along the Detroit River. You could bring a fish in any of them, I think, for the most part. And it's really similar to what you're doing in the boat. The only difference is you're casting. You're generally casting maybe on like a 45-degree angle up current, and you're closing your bail as soon as it hits the water. And then you're waiting for it to feel the bottom. Once you feel that jig hit the bottom, all you're doing is lifting it up and then reeling down to it and then letting it hit the bottom. And you're just doing that all the way back to shore, just bouncing a jig. The difference is you're going to throw it about 2 o'clock and your line ends up at about 10 o'clock by the time you're done reeling it in because the current.
Yeah.
And this more than ever comes down to that braid again. Thinner braid is more sensitive. It has a lot less drag and it keeps you in that strike zone a lot longer. And the guys that are doing that are a lot more successful than the other ones. You know, you go down there and you see some guys that know what they're doing. They're catching a limit, and other guys are like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And they always say, "Oh, it's a secret bait, and it's this and that." It's the line in the right rod for shore fishing. We have a lot of guys actually throw a 6'3" jigging rod offshore. To me, it's like crazy. I want to cast further and have more control. You're on a bank that's 6-7 feet off the water, so it's a lot different. Our tube rod is actually the exact same blank, exact same action as the 6'3" jigging rod, and that's probably our most pop. Oh, you got that is one of the ones you grabbed.
I got the tube special.
That's the one. Should have named it the shore special, to be honest.
It's the 7.2 medium heavy extra fast.
So that is our exact same action as our 6'3" jigging rod. And all the shore guys are loving it because they're casting jigs a mile. And it has a sensitivity to feel them all the way back in. That's the rod I would recommend to anybody that wants to do it. We have a lot of people that like to throw that 6'3" though. You're just getting a lot more control, a lot more distance with that longer rod compared to a shorter rod.
Absolutely. Even like when we shore fish for salmon or different species around our area, a longer rod is definitely gives you, obviously you can cast farther, but yeah, you have a lot more control over fish. But I mean, it also comes down to personal preference, right? Some guys are just stuck in their ways, right?
Yeah.
Whatever.
That would just be the one I would recommend.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And you see what sells and you talk to people and whatever's popular, that's usually a good reason for it being popular, right?
Generally speaking, it's a little bit heavier of a jig from shore as well. And this is where I think the jig market has gone crazy upwards, is because shore casting is so popular. Most people are throwing 3/4 to 1 ounce jigs. I'd probably say 3/4 is the most popular on shore, and 5/8 is the most popular in the boat. If I had to judge it, in the US, it's a lot. They use a lot heavier jigs in the US than we do for some reason.
Things are a lot heavier in the United States. Anyway, I thought we could quickly go over some of the rods because we talked earlier about how you have a lineup of very reasonably priced rods. A lot of them are specifically for walleye fishing. A lot of them are great for bass fishing. You also have a musky rod, which I know Andrew picked up. Andrew was looking for a very specific, I'll tell you this, Andrew, he's very picky when it comes to his musky rods. And we looked at a bunch of different rods over the last, I'd say 4 or 5 months. Since last year, he caught his big muskie. He's like, I need to get another rod. So he picked up a whole bunch of different rods, but we ended up going in your booth and I was like, oh, check out that muskie rod. It's a 9.6 extra heavy, but it's not like, how would you describe it? It's not super stiff.
So it's first of all, telescopic. And I would say the most telescopic rod I've seen. Like that it goes way deep into the handle, further than I think others do. And
my Daiwa, I swear to God, it's telescopic. It's the Pro Rex. It's like $200. It only goes in like a foot. Your rod actually goes like all the way back. Like it actually fits in your car.
It's like roughly 24 inches. It goes down to about a 7 foot, 6.5 ish.
That's amazing. Yeah.
That's so good. Yeah. So I love that because I can transport it easier. But like my biggest thing with the musky rod is I was looking for one for my general purpose. It's not for casting big rubbers and it's not for casting and doing like figure eights on big bucktails. I wanted something that's going to cast the rest of my baits in between. I want to work a top water with it if I want to. I want to do, just cast retrieve. I want to do glide baits. And I wanted it a 9.5 foot because I wanted to do easier figure eights. So I wanted extra heavy, but I didn't want a really stiff tip because I want that flexibility. I want it to load well on the lighter baits that I want to, again, I want to cast everything with it. So this thing being like 9.6, extra heavy, but it's like moderate fast. It's not an extra fast rod. So you can actually like load that tip up really nice, but it has all the backbone you need to still figure eight. I'm really, really impressed with the rod. I can't wait to use it. It's the action that I absolutely wanted on a length. Because we picked up some other ones, like St. Croix, like amazing rods. I love St. Croix rods.
Yeah,
but stiff.
They're stiff. And they're too stiff for what I wanted, right? I would say that it's a softer tip on that one than a heavy St. Croix. But again, that's just because theirs is fast. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I'm really impressed with that. For me, it fits the exact niche that I was like wanting in my rod.
When designing it, like I said, I don't claim to be a musky expert whatsoever. I had, Peter, one of our post-off guys. You're actually holding up that Producto shad bait.
Yep.
I actually named it after Peter. My first thing I asked Peter when he was testing it, I'm like, can you feel the swim bait thump? Because that's what a lot of musky guys say. they want to feel that tail kicking. Right away, he's like, yeah, we ended up making some changes, put a little bigger guides. I made the handle a little longer for further casting and a little bit lighter carbon to get the weight down. But he's beyond impressed with it in the market right now. I would say he's probably got 15 casting rods, and that one's become his favorite, not just because he's working with us, but he truly believes it. We made every change that our customers said that we should make from when we first came out with one last year with a little bit smaller guides, and guys were worried about them icing, which to me was crazy because I'm like, well, it's 2 weeks of the season, but I guess I didn't look at the bigger picture of everything. So we made the eyes a little bit bigger and the rod just a hair lighter and the handle 2 inches longer. So we took all the feedback and made a bunch of changes, and I think we got it perfect.
And now you've made all the musky guys happy. It's
Yeah.
You can do it. You can make everyone happy.
It is.
Nah,
It's
we're
definitely
trying.
a nice looking rod. We're excited to try it out. I know at CanCast we saw you had a bunch of them, and I saw more than a few people walking around with them that bought them. So it didn't just catch our eye; it caught a bunch of other people's eyes too.
Yeah, a bunch of them went at CanCast. I couldn't believe the muskie market up there.
Yeah, I think muskie fishing is starting to slowly become a little more popular, despite it being a very crazy hobby. Insane.
Yeah, I was going to say, going back to like walleye and even smallmouth and stuff. The other rod I picked up was a 7.2 medium.
Power shot.
And yeah, the power shot. Again, that's kind of I'm the kind of guy where what a rod says it's for isn't always what I want to use it for, right?
Yes.
So the power shot, I'm like, great. But I like a long jigging rod. So I want to use it for jigging. I think it'd also be really well suited for like a nice spinning like jerkbait rod. So that's just a nice action to be able to work it well. But again, I want my rods to load up nice. I don't like super, super stiff rods. That fits really well, but I'm really excited to have that one, a really nice bend on it for more finesse smallmouth and a great like walleye rod. I'm really excited for it.
Just like a good general purpose rod.
Yeah, like you said it perfect. It's our most versatile rod. Whether you want to slow roll a swim bait, snap a hair jig, you can vertical jig with it, power shot with it. I designed it for like throwing a heavy drop shot. That's what I wanted for like Eastern Erie and Thousand Islands when it gets wavy and you need a half ounce or 5/8. That's what it was originally designed for. Then you just figure out it's like, wow, that's a really good substitute for that. And it's probably the most popular with jerkbait guys, especially down here. Probably the number one rod guys are grabbing for a jerkbait right now because it's 7.2 medium and it's just it loads up really well and it keeps them pinned. Probably our most all around rod we make
for doing those little quick like taps or whatever with the jerk paint and stuff. The tip stays nice and stiff for it, but as soon as like you like go back cast with it and to actually cast with it, it actually starts to flex, and that's what I want. Or when you're fighting a fish, you're going to feel it's sensitive, it's stiff enough to be sensitive, but it's automatically going to start giving you that elasticity that you obviously want when you're fighting a fish.
That parabolic bend in it keeps fish pinned, right? And getting it right with the right action is key. That's why we, everyone says, oh, why do you label your rods? And I'm like, I like to give the people the best, the interest. This is what it's designed for, but it could be used for this, this, and this. Mm-hmm. But it's, more specifically designed for this. A lot of people just go in there, oh, it's a 7.2 medium. Like, what's it differentiate from other ones? That's the way we kind of built the brand around it.
So the other rods I'll just quickly go over because I know we're kind of going over time. As mentioned, I got the 7.2 medium heavy. When I picked up this rod, I wasn't thinking about walleye at all, but I was thinking more for largemouth fishing in the Kawarthas when I'm doing like power finesse kind of heavy duty drop shots, tube jigs, wacky worms, stuff like that around kind of thicker cover. So I'm excited to use that.
When he downsizes to a 3/0 hook.
Oh yeah. The one rod though I'm super excited to get, it's the Finesse Special. And this one is a 7.6 medium light extra fast. It's long. Like it's not the longest rod you could possibly have, but this is like the longest generally that most brands make is 7.5 foot medium light. It's got a very sensitive tip, but it actually it's got extra fast, but it loads. It has like a really good parabolic bend to it when you hook a fish. And I'm planning on using that to whip out really small swim baits. Because that's what we do a lot of the times when you're fishing a small, 1/8 ounce head on a swim bait, and you want to whip that thing as far as you can away from the boat where we fish anyway. So that extra long rod is really going to help me do that. And using lighter line, like I'm using 8-pound braid with like a 6-pound leader, that bend's going to really protect the leader and help me get those fish in. So we're excited to use these. We're going to obviously post some stuff when we actually get out and use them. And hopefully I catch more fish than Andrew, but we'll see what happens.
That rod was originally called our Ned Special. We called it the Finesse Special because it's one of those things that just got versatile. Guys were, throwing hair jigs on it, spy bait, like spy baiting got super popular when we first came out with that rod, and guys were loving that rod for that technique. Small swim baits, quarter ounce head, 2.8 stuff. So we just rebranded it, made a couple small tweaks, but that's the history of that rod.
They didn't want to buy a rod that said Ned rig on it because then they'll get made fun of by their friends. Just kidding. So anyway, we're going to wrap this episode up a bit because I know we do appreciate Derrick you being on here. I know, we always say it's going to be an hour and it's always like 7 hours. So we do appreciate you dropping all this knowledge on us, as well as that super awesome giveaway. Like me and Andrew say every time, we're kind of jealous about the giveaways because the giveaways this year have been absolutely bananas. And we can't win them. Someone else has to, but that's fine. That's fine. Somebody is going to win $250 gift card for the website, and you'll be able to buy any of the stuff that we talked about today. The musky rod, the big swim baits. I'd really, really recommend looking at these swim baits. They look fire, like absolutely very good. Also very durable too. So you don't have to buy like 20 packs of them. Just buy like 10. That's fine.
And we didn't even mention the fact that Derrick even has some reels and stuff for sale as well. So some of those like spinning reels and stuff like that, they're nice as well. They pair up really awesome. And if you're all about matching your colors, they pair perfectly aesthetically with his rods. So,
and again, it's all very reasonably priced as well. Nothing crazy. This isn't like you're going to buy one rod and spend $400. These are very reasonably priced. Actually, our buddy Paul, we came to the booth at CanCast and we convinced him to buy one because he's like, I want a perch rod.
I did badger him a bit into it.
Yeah. I dragged him from the one building to the other. I was like, no, you got to check out this like finesse perch, like drop shot rod. And he walked all the way over and then he ended up buying it. So yeah. Paul's pretty finicky too with his rod. So that must mean something, that it's a good rod. So congratulations, Paul, on your new rod. So anyway, I thought we could end with one more question and you can keep this brief. What is the most common mistake that beginners make when they're walleye fishing in your area?
It's almost tough to make a mistake down here.
That's all we need to know. Guys, book your trips. Go fishing. You will catch fish.
No, I think it's just picking the wrong days. Like I said, with the weather down here, the lakes and the river are just temperamental. You have to be able to adapt. If the Canadian shoreline's blown out, you need to have a U.S. license and fish U.S. water. And that's just the gist of it, especially in the spring. Like I said, if you come anytime between, middle of April to middle of May is probably the prime time for the most numbers of fish. That river's loaded end to end. It's really tough not to, but it's just paying attention to the the weather and the wind. East winds down here are not good. It speeds up the current and it makes it jams Lake St. Clair all the way into the Detroit River. It seems to muddy it up end to end. You don't want pure mud when you're jigging. You want be able to see. I call a foot is like the prime time. It gets super clear and you can catch them in super clear too. Just early season, that's prime time. But that's probably the number one thing I would say is just watch the weather and the wind. Even though it's a river system and there's always somewhere to fish, if you get a 4 or 5 days of east wind before you're coming down here and 100 millimeters of rain, it's probably not ideal. That would be the biggest thing I'd say to look out for.
Awesome. Good advice. So before we end this, I would just like to say to everyone that everything that we talked about today, I'm going to put below in the show notes. So if you are interested, if you're listening to the audio version of this, which 90% of you do, and you want to know what these baits look like that we talked about, I'm going to leave the links below. You just click on the link. It'll take you right to the page where you can check them out, see how they look for the rods, the baits, everything that we talked about as well. And if you're interested in winning that $250 gift card, here's how you win. You have to go on our Patreon. And I'm going to put up a post that says Tactical Fishing Gear Giveaway. And you're going to go on that post and you're going to comment and say something like, I want to win this. That's how we're doing it now. You have to go. You're not automatically entered. You have to go onto the post, say that you want to win this. And this is just helping people that actually want specific things to win prizes. We want people to win the stuff that actually really want this stuff. So make sure you go on the post. Again, the link's going to be down below so that you can definitely win that. And yeah, I'm jealous. It's a super good giveaway. So thanks again, Derrick.
No problem, guys. Thanks for having me.
We have some awesome episodes coming up. We actually have this is episode 100, which is pretty special, but we have some really, really cool episodes coming up in the next month. In fact, we have in the next episode coming up another walleye episode, but it's going to be talking more about the Kawartha area. So you'll get the best of both worlds. You get Detroit River, St. Clair, and then you also get the Kawarthas as well. So stay tuned for that.
First off, we're going to have a quick line from Derrick as to where we can find him.
Our website is just tacticalfishinggear.com. There's information page about all our products, and then there's a shop now. We are in a ton of retailers across Ontario, likely in a retailer near you. We're expanding quickly to the US. Instagram's tacticalfishinggear_. Get a hold of us. You got any questions, you need, any advice coming down here, question about products, whatever. I monitor it myself. I would be glad to, answer pretty well any question. Or even, some people are worried about shipping rods and stuff like that. I can put it into the closest retailer to you and get you in touch with them.
And again, I'll link all that down below so you don't have to do any work.
Perfect. As tradition states, we're going to have the quote of the week. And to handle that, Derrick.
I say it all the time because I dislike work, but the worst day of fishing is better than the best day at work. And that is just the truth. I'd rather not catch a single fish, get poured on in rain, than go to work.